Hi guys, and welcome to the Stephen King Sematary Club. Chapter 9 is cleaning up. So Beverly has left Tom. She is injured. She is without money, without clothing. She needs to get out of town, go to Derry, but she has no way of doing that on her own. So she goes to her friend Kay's house. Now Kay is a rich, militant feminist, and the way King writes her, I really don't like her. I find her off-putting, I find her obnoxious, and she's a bitch. So Beverly gets money from her, buys a plane ticket, and leaves for Derry. Quote, "She looks out the window, looks down, and thinks that Tom's evil is a small and petty thing compared with the evil waiting for her in Derry." Page 375. Now, interestingly, most of these people have this sense that once they go to Derry, they're not coming back. They just feel like this is going to kill them, but the promise that they made is so binding, and it's something that they made when they were kids. It's just so adult. I don't know. They had this amazing friendship, an amazing bond, and I love it. So now we go back in time. So after the day where Beverly and Ben and Richie went to the movies, they are now in the Barrens and they're playing all day with Bill and that other kid, the Lisp kid. Barry? I don't remember. Beverly goes home and she has a terrible home life, and I feel so sorry for her. Her dad is awful. Her mom she has been a willing participant, but she lets the father treat Beverly however he wants. He dishes out the punishment. You know, it's a bad situation. So Beverly is in the bathroom and she hears voices coming from the drain, the sink drain. Now it's one of those open drains, so she can look in there, and the imagery is just so creepy. This is one of my favorite manifestations of it. So she speaks, and the voice in the drain answers her, and it's a whole bunch of dead children's voices and a sinister, evil, "We're gonna come for you and kill all of you and your friends and you'll float." There's just so much. Quote, "Her hand went to her mouth and her eyes widened in horror. For a moment, just for a moment, she believed she had seen something moving down there." Page 377. So she has been looking in this drain, and all of a sudden she realizes that her long hair, is in the sink very close to the drain, and she is suddenly very aware that something could grab her and pull her hair in. Ugh. I hate drains. I hate pipes. I hate all that stuff. I don't like what could be lurking in there. I don't like dirty stuff. So it's effective. It really creeps me out. So anyway, this voice, like I said, it changes. It's different people. It's different kids. They speak to her. They know different things that, not everyone would know. And all of a sudden, a big spurt of blood just comes out of the drain. Geyser of blood. And gets over everything. She screams. Her dad, he runs in, and he's like, "Is someone looking at you in the bathroom?" Because he has a very unhealthy obsession with his daughter and her sexuality. And, well, she's not even realizing her sexuality yet. But he is very aware of it, and he is very not fatherly toward her. And her mom even asks her at one point, "Does your dad touch you?" I do feel bad for her, and I understand that, if he said jump in front of a train, she would do it. That is just unhealthy, and that explains a lot of her future relationships, but it's still so hard to put yourself in that position. So her dad is in the bathroom now, and he can't see the blood. So what Beverly sees is just a mess. Quote, "There was blood on the mirror running in long drips. There were spots of blood on the light over the sink. She could smell it cooking onto the 40-watt bulb. Blood ran down the porcelain sides of the sink and plopped in fat drops on the linoleum floor." Page 379. So her dad washes his hands, dries his hands off on the bloody towel, because the towel got blood all over it. Quote, she watched, near swooning, as he grimed blood into his big knuckles and the lines of his palms. Page 379. The idea of seeing blood like that and then having no one else, well, I guess just her father at this point, but no one else seeing it, you think you're going crazy. It's gross and it's getting everywhere and it's a really big mess. I don't even know. So she is just shocked. She is at a loss because she had a feeling that when her dad came in, he was going to be pissed off because of the mess, but he can't even see it. So, says her dad hits her on the butt, then the arm, and then in her stomach. So, what the fuck? Who does that to their kids? I do not understand that kind of behavior. I don't understand people who beat their children. I don't understand people who sexually prey on their children. So Beverly eventually makes a story up because she's not answering her dad. She doesn't know what to do. So she finally makes a story up about a spider that crawled out of the drain and then went back down into the drain. And her dad is relieved. He's like, oh, that's all? And he says, quote, was that it? Damn. If you'd told me, Beverly, I never would have hit you. All girls are scared of spiders. Page 380. Asshole. So she watches as her father looks for the spider. Like he's looking in the drain and something in her wants to warn him. But then a bigger part of her says, fuck it, maybe something will grab him and get rid of him. So that says it all. You know, she obeys her father, she loves him in a way, but she also hates him and wouldn't mind if he died. So her mom comes home and she also doesn't see anything, and Beverly is afraid to go to sleep that night. Quote, she found herself afraid to turn over on her right side, her favorite sleeping position, because she might see something looking in the window at her. Page 383. I can so relate to that. The next day, Beverly shows Eddie, Stan, and Ben the bathroom, and they can all see the blood, and they're horrified. They're like, oh my god, what happened in here? You know, this is awful. And you've been living in this, and your parents don't see it at all. This is just astounding. So they end up using rags to clean it up. Then they're going to go wash the rags at the laundromat, although one of them brings up the point that, you know, the parents aren't even going to see the blood anyway, so they don't have to wash the rags, but, you know, it's the principle of the thing. So they go to this laundromat and they're doing the laundry. And this is where we hear Stan's story, because we don't have an adult Stan because he killed himself, so he isn't able to have his own flashback and share his experience with it. Beverly does it for us by remembering Stan's recollection of what happened to him. So it is an interesting, I mean, we still get Stan's story, which I like, because his is also one of the creepiest ones. Stan is into bird watching. He and his father like to collect birds, as they call it, and one day Stan goes down to the Derry standpipe. But there's a history to this water tower where people have drowned, and all the kids, except for Stan, seem to know little bits and pieces of stories passed down from other people in town, exaggerated details not exactly lining up, but the general idea is people have died in these, the general idea is people have died in this water tower, and now it is closed to the public except for guided tours and all that stuff, so, you know, to keep people safe. There's one line I love in here, quote, talking about children who fell into the standpipe, quote, how long before the cries had ceased and they had simply floated face down, strange fish for the caretaker to find the next morning. Page 399. Something about that line, strange fish, it just always has stood out to me. So Stan is at this park, Memorial Park, at around dusk, and he's looking for a cardinal because apparently cardinals are kind of rare in Maine. He's engrossed in looking through the binoculars and trying to identify a bird. It's a cowbird. And all of a sudden he hears a huge bang, like out of nowhere, super loud, scares all the birds away. So Stan gets up, he explores a little bit, and he sees that the door to the standpipe is open, and the padlock that was on it is like melted and destroyed. It's just laying on the ground. So he enters, he hears calliope music, like circus music, and he hears squishy, furtive footsteps coming toward him in the dark. He sees like a shadowy figure of like lumpy little people. So he turns to run and the door's locked. He can't get out. He talks to these kids and they say they're the dead ones and he will be dead too and he'll float, and they're all there and they're all going to be floating together dead. And there's a really great passage about the calliope music. Quote, "The calliope music had gotten louder yet. It drifted and echoed down the spiral staircase. There was nothing cheery about it now. It had changed. It had become a dirge. It screamed like wind and water, and in his mind's eye Stan saw a county fair at the end of autumn, wind and rain blowing up a deserted midway, pennons flapping, tents bulging, falling over, wheeling away like canvas bats. He saw empty rides standing against the sky like scaffolds. The wind drummed and hooted in the weird angles of their struts. He suddenly understood that death was in this place with him, that death was coming for him out of the dark, and he could not run. He holds his bird book up and starts shouting names of birds at these dead children, just as they're ready to touch him. And the door opens and he escapes, and he kind of like falls to his butt and starts scooting backwards in the grass. And the description of these children is so bone-chilling and flesh-crawlingly creepy. Let's see. It's on page 408. So you can see their genes. Quote, "Their hands lay limply at their sides, too long, too waxy white. Depending from each finger was a small orange pom-pom. Holding his bent bird book in front of him, his face wet with grizzle, sweat, and tears, Stan whispered in a husky monotone, 'Chicken hawks, grosbeaks, hummingbirds, albatrosses, kiwis.' One of those hands turned over, showing a palm from which endless water had eroded all the lines, leaving something as idiot smooth as the hand of a department store dummy. One finger unrolled, then rolled up again. The pom-pom bounced and dangled, dangled and bounced. It was beckoning him. Stan Uris, who would die in a bathtub with crosses slashed into his forearms 27 years later, got to his knees, then to his feet, then ran." Oh, it's so good. And creepy. So good and so creepy. Eddie says, we need to tell Bill because Bill's the leader and Bill will know what to do. And Stan's like, dude, I don't want to do anything. I want to forget about it. I don't want any more to do with this. I told you my story. I'm done. I'm out. So they're still at the laundromat. The rags are done. Beverly takes them home alone, and she has this brilliant idea to stick her father's tape measure down the drain and see how far it goes. So she sticks it down there, and something grabs a hold of it and starts running it out. And it just keeps going and going and going. And finally it catches and starts like reeling itself back up. And as it goes, it's going really fast, and it's starting to come up with bloody gunk from the drain. Gross. So gross. So she wipes that off, and, she was worried about what her dad would do if he saw it, but then she realizes he won't see anything on it, even after she's cleaned most of it up. Derry, the second interlude. So this is February 1985. These are Mike's entries again. And he is still conflicted about calling, so he has not yet made his phone call to his friends. Quote, "Then I just held the phone against my ear, asking myself if I wanted to call them because I was really sure, 100% sure, or simply because I'm now so badly spooked that I can't stand to be alone, that I have to talk to someone who knows, or will know, what it is I am spooked about." Page 419. And I liked that "or will know" because it's true that the people don't remember until he starts talking to them and it all comes back. So in this interlude, we hear a lot about Derry's black spot and Mike's father. Mike's father was in the army, and he was in a special company E unit of only black people, and they were terribly treated. And there was a point where they were in town enjoying bars with the lumberjacks and all the, the characters who frequented these bars, who were kind of like barflies, but just working class people, no one cared. And they didn't mind that this group of black soldiers were hanging out, city council type people, and they banned the Company E from going into town and frequenting these bars. So they came up with their own, not an officers club, but similar. So their own little shed. They were given their own little shed, how big of them, and they fixed it up. They made it nice. They added a little kitchen area so that they could cook, and then it started getting super popular. They started having a band play. There were some men in the company who knew instruments, and they weren't great, but they started playing and they were pretty good and passable, and so they had, people just lining up to get in and having a good time, eating, dancing, drinking, whatnot. The fire at the Black Spot was set by the Derry branch of the Maine Legion of White Decency, but it's supposed to be like the KKK, but in the North. And Mike's dad said, quote, "It's because of the soil. It seems that bad things, hurtful things, do right well in the soil of this town. I've thought so again and again over the years. I don't know why it should be, but it is." Page 426. And Will had even left Derry for a time, but he kept thinking about it, and he returned. And Mike thinks that it was so that he could be born in Derry and be a part of this crazy situation. Quote, "And now I wonder if that blind thing might not have been at work even then, drawing him back so I could take my place in that circle in the Barrens that August evening." Page 428. Mike's dad and his mother, they had to deal with a lot of vandalism early on when they bought their farm and had moved back to Derry. There was like a swastika on his barn, and his chickens were killed, and the sheriff found out that it was Butch Bowers, which was Henry's father, who did this. And the sheriff figured that he would have Bowers pay $200 to replace the chickens in order to keep him out of Shawshank, and he ended up giving in because he didn't want to go to prison. And I love this line, quote, "The father's a turd and the son's a little fart." Page 429. That's speaking about Henry. And Will caught Bowers alone one day, and he told him to stop harassing him and his family. He pulled a gun on him, and he's like, "If you do anything to me and my family again, I'm going to kill you." And nothing ever seemed to happen after that. Bowers left him alone because he was all talk and no action. Mike had heard a little bit about the Black Spot fire, but not until Will was dying, and he asked to hear it, and Will's like, "Yep, now's the only time I'm going to have to tell you." So the Black Spot used to stand where Memorial Park is, which is where Stan was bird watching and saw the crazy stuff with the standpipe. I love, love, love this cross connection. Dick Halloran was in Company E, and he was the chef. And I think that's adorable because he will show up in The Shining, and that's his backstory. So they fixed their shed up, and they have a sign that says the Black Spot Company E and guests. And there was that little Dixieland band that was pretty good and got popular. And there were about 200 to 300 people on this Saturday night in November. The Legion of White Decency lit the Black Spot on fire with torches. And the club was so crowded and it was so loud that no one really knew what was going on. No one knew there was a fire until someone opened the kitchen door and it just exploded into flame, like everything. And people were trying to run out the door, but the door pulled, and so everyone was pushing each other against the door and stampeding each other. Will got stampeded and he is being tromped on, and he almost didn't make it, but someone reached down and grabbed him. It was Trevor. And he was almost crushed to death. Dick Halloran got them to safety because he was like, "No, we have to go back toward the fire because we can't get out this front door. We have to get out a window close to the fire." So the three of them managed to get out, and they were fine. Bill saw the same bird that Mike saw when it was a bird, and Will saw a kestrel with a 60-foot wingspan that night, and it grabbed the last sheeted man who hadn't escaped. And Will said, quote, "It floated, it floated. There were big bunches of balloons tied to each wing, and it floated." Page 449. So this was Mike's bird, and he had forgotten it until his father reminded him. Mike had fallen asleep after writing all these long journal entries, and he wakes up to a single balloon by his desk, and No footsteps leading away. There were footsteps leading toward him. Mike's face is on the balloon, and he's dead with eyes gouged out and blood running down. Have a spooky day.